Chapter 169. The establishment known as the Pearl greeted me with a massive room vibrating with the din of conversations even so early in the day. A few steps up led to a central square covered in tables, couches, and chairs where men and their hosts socialized without reserve. A long counter extended to my left with a collection of bottles and glasses sitting in well-ordered rows on a shelf that covered the entire wall. Stairs and doors surrounded this pulsing heart of sin, passages to, I assumed, private rooms where one may consummate. A well-kept piano occupied the back of the room on a small pedestal where a man of indeterminate pedigree was busy playing the violin with surprising skill. None of this truly mattered to me at that time, for my mind no longer belonged to me, but to her. My breath caught in my chest. My heart skipped a beat. A lead mantle settled on my whip, robbing me of my countenance at the sight of this apparition. She was a diamond at the center of a tiara, a rose in a bed of dandelions. A hive of, forgive me, dear reader, painted harlots buzzed around her, wearing gaudy garments and enough makeup to renovate the Westminster Cathedral with some left over for a couple of Whitehall pubs. By contrast, she only needed a plain dress in the deep green of winter pines to cover her lithe form. Her cleavage was just on the edge of daring, while a slit in her dress showed just a little too much calf. Ah, dear reader, you must feel me weak of heart and of conviction, but think of the first time you lay your eyes on the one who robbed you of your heart with a casual tilt of the head. Then you would understand my predicament, for indeed, she had captured my attention while my cold mind refused to let go of the only thing that stopped me from throwing myself at her feet. She lounged gracefully in a brothel's main room. It did not take the mind of Isaac Newton to guess what her occupation might be. The scarlet of her hair was like a winter twilight, brazen and beautiful, yet cold. The smoldering of her brown eyes held a distance that I feared no man could ever bridge. For all her modesty, she was a kiln of desire, and for all of that passion, she was cold as ice. None of the activity around her touched the windows of her soul as they followed me across the room. As much as I tried to escape the burning frost of her fingers on my heart, I knew that I would charge forth for a true smile to bloom on her angelic face. It took all of my willpower to swim away from the whirlpool of her pupils and to make my way to the bar. If it had not been my original plan, I believe that I would have failed to think of one. My arrival and the ladies' gaze was noticed by a quartet of rough men nursing hard liquor. Their leader was a thug with a dirty, messy beard, two porcine eyes, and a gut covered by a shirt that might have been red under the stains at some point in the distant past. They smirked, but I decided to pay them no heed. I was a marshal now, and a marshal should not provoke people for the sake of his ego. Challenges would come soon enough. The barman was a barwoman, a solid lass with a square jaw like you would see socking their husband by the Thames for coming home stinking of gin. What she lacked in conventional beauty, she made up for in confidence, giving her a powerful presence. The mistress of liquors inspected me with a quirked brow but a pleasant enough smile, and I knew that I was not considered for shoe-slapping quite yet. "What is the second most refreshing thing you have?" I asked, still in the thrall of my heavenly vision. And indeed my heart beat a thunderous drum at the thought that she was here, behind me, so tantalizingly close. "Oh, good one. For you, pretty boy, I got some lemonade just the way my ma used to do before the pox got her. Fancy a glass?" "That would be terrific, miss," I assured her. I was eager to sample the local specialties after swallowing dust for 7 days. The lady smiled and served me in a beer mug. I sipped on tangy bliss and sighed with contentment. It was then that I heard the heavy thud of footsteps tramping behind me. Ah, what a conundrum, dear readers. I could turn and face the sun of her beauty, or show my back to what was possibly imminent danger. "Come on, Alexander," I told myself, "trust in yourself." I gathered my phlegm just in time to face the tall man in the red shirt, and recognized in his lopsided grin the base, animalistic pleasure of the simple bully at the sight of a fresh target. I was immediately on my guard and he didn't disappoint. Stopping a few paces away, he placed his meaty fists on equally meaty sides and roared his provocation. "What's a lily-livered coward doing in this here fine establishment?" I delicately placed the mug on the counter by my side and straightened my posture for the inevitable showdown. I was wondering the same thing, friend. What are you doing here? It took the brute a remarkable amount of time to decipher my insult. By that time, I had come to a decision. As a representative of the law, I was to avoid brawls and show exemplary behavior to steer the frontier masses on the path of righteousness. Unfortunately, one could not garner respect without showing a bit of spine first. I had to be realistic about my chances of convincing anyone if I hid behind my badge at the first sign of trouble. The law-abiding lad in me wanted nothing less than to bring this troublemaker to the authorities, but the adult saw that this was a different place from my proper Surrey, and when in Rome, give an idiot a sound thrashing. Don't think too hard, you'll strain something, I added helpfully. By that time, I was already on the balls of my feet and ready to give the lout what for. Indeed, his bovine face exhibited confusion, then consideration, then finally crimson anger as my defiance finally crawled its way through the underused paths of his mind. He took a step forward. He stopped immediately. Even I felt my smile slip a little when the barrel of a long hunting rifle bypassed my left ear to aim squarely at the bully's chest. None of that, boys. You take your disagreement outside or I'll splatter your guts over the floor. That means you, Walker. Don't point that thing at me, Sally. You wouldn't want to see me angry. The only reason I'm not seeing you inside out right now is that I'm the one who'll have to mop your lard off the parquet if I pull the damn trigger. You mess with me, you mess with the pearl, Walker. The thug snarled, an animalistic move that surprised me, as I would never have expected such a crude expression from a white man. Come on out, stranger. Let's see if you can put your fists where your mouth is. You and me. I'll be waiting outside. I'll put my fist where your mouth is, I grumbled to myself. Not only was I dragged into an embarrassing affair in front of a fallen angel, but now I was even denied my lemonade. For shame. Be careful, the bartender said. Her previous confidence had faded like snow under the sun. Now she looked strained and worried. I seen them drink from a vial around their neck. Makes them as strong as a bear and just as stupid. Drugs of some sort. Can they stoop any lower? I exclaimed, scandalized. I am eager to find out, your lordship. Thank you for your help, Sally. I will be careful. And my name is Alexander. No lordship for me. He will hit hard and he won't feel pain. Perhaps it's better if. Do not suggest it, Miss Sally. I could not entertain the thought. I left and thought I heard a whispered sentence about entertaining her instead. Duty called. The sun greeted me far too soon. 4 brutes waited downstairs, spread evenly to prevent my escape, I suppose. I placed my felt hat on a wooden balustrade and stepped down to meet them. I noticed that the men all had revolvers on their hips, and so I didn't remove mine. We can start whenever you wish, I informed my would-be opponent. A crowd was already forming to watch us rumble. Now then, you little shit. I'm going to show you why they call me the Hammer, Walker grumbled. He spit in his fist, which was to me as abhorrent as it was incomprehensible, and picked around his soiled shirt to reveal a tiny flask. He drank from it what must have been just a drop, but his ugly mug immediately exhibited into an expression of pure, unadulterated felicity, a happiness defiled by the beastly instincts it fed on. The brute roared and came at me swinging. Dear readers, I never mentioned it before since it was scarcely relevant to the story, but do note that I took quite a few licks from William Bendigo Thompson at the bequest of my father, who had rescued that awesome man from his drunken morass. One does not survive apprenticeship under England's former heavyweight champion without learning a few tricks, a notion my opponent discovered immediately when I dove under his haymaker and delivered a powerful jab on his liver. To my surprise, the man barely grunted under the onslaught, and the backhand blow would have caught me off guard without Sally's warning. As it was all I could do to dodge the onslaught. Walker would rush at me and hit with everything he had. I would move to the side, deflect and block what I could before he would charge again. The few painful counters I landed would have incapacitated most men, but he was no longer himself. It was when he landed a solid blow on my shoulder and I reciprocated by breaking his nose that I realized the only avenue of salvation left to me. The blow got me the first solid reaction since the beginning of the fight. Walker shook his head and pulled back. His blood ran a fresh coat of color on his blemished shirt. I had to aim for the face. Instead of waiting for the man to recover, I charged into the breach with determination. A proper pummel would see me take the day. And pummel him I did, until my knuckles bled. I gave the lout the correction he deserved without giving him the chance to recover, even taking a small hit to the temple so I could keep fighting. It was when my adversary barely stood that an imperious voice woke me from the focus of battle. "Behind you." I turned just in time to block a hook aimed at my neck. The gull. "What manner of miscreant interrupts a fisticuff?" I asked. "Only the vilest, most norless fiends." Anger seized my heart, and I gave the surprised foe an uppercut that sent him careening on the ground. When I turned, Walker had not moved yet for he was stunned, but one of his cronies had his hand suspiciously close to a grubby handle. That was when, dear reader, I decided to put a stop to this farce. Insults and knuckle fights might toe the line of legality, but assault with a gun crosses it. I casually opened my vest, revealing the star beneath, and saw my assailant pale. "You will remove your filthy paw from that disgrace of a gun, or, with God as my witness, you won't live long enough to regret it," I told the man. It was with some trepidation that I observed the terror on the man's traits. Unfortunately, he had frozen in place and, heeding Mr. Delaney's advice, I took a step back and to the side in order to put my back against the wall and keep all the mooks in sight. This maneuver let me look at the man still on the ground, nursing his jaw and glaring. "You're messing with the crew," the gunman grumbled into his possibly lice-infested beard. "Nobody messes with the crew. The law messes with everyone, villain. Remove that hand now." "Let's all calm down now," another one said. "We will all take a deep breath and go our separate ways. Surely you do not expect to threaten an officer and refuse to comply and just walk away?" "I have questions for you lot," I said, outraged that they would suggest just leaving. You must understand, dear readers, that I was quite young at the time. The very idea of letting those ruffians go even temporarily filled my heart with righteous fury. Did they honestly believe that they could almost kill a man, then walk away after their attempt failed? The hammer of justice would smite those louts here and now, for the scale-bearing goddess could suffer no compromise. "That's a bad idea, friend," the man continued, his hand sliding to his holster. I could feel where the situation was going, and placed myself in the proper posture to draw. Around us, the crowd raced away to take their distance. They knew too. I breathed in and breathed out. All thoughts of anger left me. There was only me and the three targets. Two on my right, one on the ground, on my left. Walker was still standing drunkenly, a line of drool dripping down his bruised lips. 3. They would move. I knew they would try. The right man would do it. The man in the middle was hesitating, and the one on the left was waiting. Breathe in. A rictus of rage. A hand grabbing down. Motion. I was ready. I drew and shot once, twice, thrice. I caught the first two in the heart and the last one under his chin. They fell. Breathe out. They were dead. I would have liked to claim, dear readers, that I felt vindicated since I had stopped an attempt on my person. A sense of duty fulfilled enough safer streets would have been welcome, I assure you. However, the only thing filling my chest were horror and a deep sense of emptiness. I had killed. I had broken the first commandment. The circumstances did not matter to me at that time, and neither did the legality or morality of my actions. The visceral reaction to ending one's life cared not for such abstract notions. I had killed a person. I had killed 3 people, and my life would never be the same again. Curiously, what drew me away from the abyss was not the muttering mob, but the memory of my mentor's advice. I knew, as a marshal, that I would have to deliver death. My father Ronald and his father Cecil had taken lives all around the globe. Miss Delaney had been quite insistent that I should realize this, and not to hesitate when the time came. I was alive because of my conviction. It had been their choice to draw on an officer of the law, and it had been my choice to pursue this career. I was where I had meant to go. Now, I had to own it. Out of habit, I checked my corners and replaced the 3 spent cartridges in the cylinder, just in time to see Worker collapse on his side with the ponderous speed of a toppling tree. A few of the women in the crowd screamed at the sight of 3 cadavers. I did not feel like doing much right now, so I hailed an old caravan driver with a massive white beard. "Is the sheriff on his way?" "He sure is, my boy. You're a little young to be a marshal, but there is nothing wrong with your aim." "Hot damn. Then when the gentleman arrives, please be sure to direct them inside. I need a drink." "Sure thing, your lordship. Just Marshal Bingle is fine." I went through the doors again. I had a lemonade waiting for me. Of course, as soon as I crossed the threshold, all thoughts of liquid were forgotten in favor of something infinitely more invigorating, the sight of my fallen angel and her smile. Oh, that smile. I will never forget it. In this false palace of stucco and golden paint, from within that den of sin, surrounded by colored glass and frilly apparels, it was the only genuine thing I could spot. Oh, and Sally's lemonade too, I suppose. It was quite fine. "You had us worried there," she told me. Her voice was low and husky, as smooth and indulgent as dark chocolate. I could have listened to her read an address book and never grown bored. I might have been concerned as well, I freely admitted, though concern cannot stop me. She chuckled. Waves of bliss radiated from my stricken heart with every ha of merriment. I could do nothing. I was undone before the battle even started. "I prefer courage over temerity, sir. How may I call our savior?" "Alexander Bingle, Malady, at your service. I cannot claim this title since those ruffians were after me, not after you." "Oh, they were after all of us. The crew regularly comes to unwind in town between 2 dastardly deeds. They are rowdy, rude, and they do not pay." "Dreadful. Then I am glad that I have done my duty." This boastful comment awarded me with another chuckle. Then, my fallen angel removed a shell from, forgive me, dear readers, her cleavage. She used it to sponge the smidgen of blood on my temple despite my protests. I was loath to soil such a precious piece of fabric, but the lady would not have it. When she was done, she tied the colorful item around my arm. "You defended us, Mr. Bingle. It is only fair that my knight in shining armor would wear my colors." I was blushing mightily during the whole process, as you can imagine. It did not help that the shell still carried her perfume, and its delicate scent titillated my nose during the entire delightful ordeal. I prayed to be delivered from inappropriate thoughts, but my faith failed me, or to be precise, it could not compete. "How may I call you, my fiery angel?" "Oh, that's a new one. Call me Annie." Annie. 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 I had a name for her now. "Quick, Alexander, get a hold of yourself." Then, Annie. "Why is the sheriff not acting?" "He is a reasonable man. The sheriff has 5 deputies to deal with scuffles between colonists. He doesn't have the numbers to stop the crew. They have 100 men, all veterans from the war. On both sides. Disciplinary battalion dogs, the lot of them. They do nothing to stop this ignominy?" I exclaimed. "Scandalous." "Alas, no. My thanks again, Mr. Bingle. I have to talk to the other girls. If you'll excuse us." "Certainly." I made my resolute way to the bar out of fear that I would stare at her back and not stop until she had disappeared from my view. Sally was still at her post, polishing a glass with nervous gestures. Her smile was more bitter and sad than I remembered. "You got them. Well, better than the alternative, I suppose. It couldn't go on anyway. Here," she said, giving me a piece of cloth drenched in cold water, which I applied to the bruise on my head with effusive gratitude. "Think nothing of it," she replied. "You just, never mind, a wild weed can't match a rose, huh? Just be careful when you go out. The crew will want to take revenge. You should get out of town soon. Hole up somewhere." "Never. But I understand your concern and will not go charging at 100 men. I am courageous, not stupid." A doubt crossed my mind at some of my past actions. I firmly believed that a dumb man can never learn, which made me exempt. In my own eyes. You take care now, Mr. Bingo. Can't I call you Alexander? Of course, Sally, 'tis only fair. Oh, the sheriff is here. Can see his hat from the window. You ought to go talk to him. Don't let your guard down, you hear? Never let your guard down. Thank you, Sally. And I will see you later. Yeah. You do that. I stepped outside, ready to face the music. The sheriff was an old man with a neatly trimmed gray beard and a white felt hat, making him visible from afar. He was accompanied by a few fellows of various ages, and they all had one thing in common besides their badge of office, a deep fear that they never bothered to hide. You done did it, boy. You done did it. The Lord save me from hot hats, Jesus. They are dead. I was merely defending myself, sir. They drew first. Yes, I'm sure. Not that it matters. You just started a war, boy, and it's us that got to pick the pieces, if we ain't pieces ourselves. Jesus Lord have mercy. Instead of complaining, should you not call for reinforcements? I asked, annoyed. I understand caution, but it looks like you gave up. Alas, my comment turned the man's face red with unbridled rage. You think I ain't done it? That I'm sitting on my ass all day long? The crew's a fist, boy, and the arm behind it is longer than mine, is all it is. I did ask, and I was ignored. The second time the crew officer visited me at my home, got it? I see. Then. It is a conspiracy. I exclaimed. What an unexpected development. Who could have guessed that a chance to apply justice would present itself so soon? The sheriff just shrugged sadly. I begrudged him his defeatism. The man needed a stiff upper lip and a proper mustache to adorn it, I say. His responsibility for the town was too important to give up after 2 attempts, and I did not think that the grasp of the crew extended to the marshal office, or to the Anti-Corruption Commission. Unless. Is there some dark magic at work? I regretted my words as soon as they crossed my lips and the men present crossed themselves in a cascade of muttered prayers. No witches here, boy. This is a Christian town. They are not allowed inside. And if we catch one, she'll burn. I closed my mouth with a click, because their reaction spread a fear that almost reached a boiling point. I had to return to my convoy and take stock. Well, are you going to at least arrest Walker? We cannot leave him lying in the street like a swine. Yes. We'll get him inside, look after his wound. You should go, boy. Leave town if you know what's good for you. I decided that discretion would be the best part of valor, for now. I needed to learn more about the situation before deciding on a course of action. I did not face a small band of cattle thieves, but a large group with a powerful backer. Almost a private army. Rushing in headlong would only lead to a lone grave on the prairie. I left on my horse, wary of my surroundings. The town was barricading itself already, and I spared a thought for the safety of Annie. The locals were rushing back while the visitors fled to the safety of their own camps. I made good time and found Miss Delaney's convoy without much difficulty, as they had found a prime location on a small hill. I was led into her secured carriage and locked its massive door behind me. I had no idea how oxens managed to pull forward what amounted to a portable fortress. Inside of the carriage, a palladarian awaited me. The vivacious woman lost her luster during the day. Her traits were drawn and her eyes had sunk, yet they still shone with a cold intelligence in the shimmering blue light of a strange lantern. A series of documents were laid on a large desk that occupied much of the surface. A steaming cup of her excellent coffee awaited my presence. I sat down and tasted it gratefully. Then, the floodgates opened and I dumped the tale of the recent events onto her patient lap. The mysterious lady listened without interrupting me until I was fully done. Her first reaction was to quirk a brow with an expression I seldom ever saw on her delicate features, surprise. She picked an elegant silver watch from an unseen pocket and checked the time. Barely 1 in the afternoon, and we already have a brawl, a gunfight, and a love interest. She grumbled. You certainly worked fast. I credit you for your success, although you could have avoided the risky duel. That was an unnecessary risk. Why would I do such a thing? The law must have the last word. Humiliated thugs must retaliate or lose their main source of power, fear. They will come for you no matter what. I would advise you to be more flexible in your pursuit of justice, young Bingle. You can always make an arrest while in a position of strength. The side of good should never look down on guile and delayed punishment, as some of your fellow people have demonstrated. In any case, you are uninjured, so I suppose it does not matter. Did you keep the vial of potion with you? The effects you described sound familiar. Alas, no. I did not think of it, I grudgingly admitted. No matter, I will be sure to visit the morgue tonight. I am quickly learning more of the situation as the day goes on. It appears that your private militia and my railroad project issues are related. Could it be that the mysterious backer behind them is the same person? I exclaimed, happy for the quick and gratuitous development. Yes. How fortunate, Miss Delaney said, though she betrayed no emotion. I need some more time to finish reading those reports. Stay as long as you like. Don't waste coffee. I pondered today's events in a silence only broken by the susurrus of turning pages. I had found a terrible injustice, but more importantly, I had desperately fallen in love at first sight with someone no mother would approve of. I had to save her. I had to find out which circumstances had led her to sell her dignity and make an honest woman out of her. I could accept no other outcome. After finishing my cup, I escaped and tried to absorb myself in the many tasks before me. The repetitive nature of cleaning, washing, and darning the holes in all I had provided no distraction. My thoughts wandered back to the woman, Annie, her smile, her delicate perfume. I dared not touch the shawl tied to my arm. What did it mean? Had I truly earned her favor, or was this a ploy from a cunning woman? Did I even care? Forgive me those ramblings, dear reader. I was a moth caught by the prettiest fire this side of the Atlantic. The fallen angel had me hook, line, and sinker. I was a doomed man. My only solace came a couple of hours later after everything was done and the shock of love and death merged with the fatigue of the trip. I collapsed on my cot and only opened my eyes after the sun had set. I realized that I was ravenous and left my tent to a surreal vision. The camp was on a sparsely wooded hill around a grass-covered meadow. Its center was now occupied by the most curious of scenes. Miss Delaney stood to the side next to a table carrying scientific equipment, inspecting a test tube filled with dark liquid. Meanwhile, Mr. Need sat at a table covered with a genuine white cloth. Candelabras provided a warm glow that seemed to ward off the evening's chill, while tall glasses filled with golden wine spoke of summer afternoons by the lake. Mr. Need himself was resplendent in a beige ensemble, princely and lavish, yet sharp. An ethereal woman I had never seen before played the harp with impressive mastery, reinforcing the feeling of otherworldliness. I felt as if I had stumbled across a banquet in a dream, and that Puck might lead Oberon and Titania to join us shortly. And yet, the glass felt solid under my fingers when I joined them, and the wine tasted of honey. So good to see you, young Bingle, Mr. Need said as he shoved a cracker in my hand. It was covered with cucumber slice so thin it was perfectly transparent. I took a bite and sighed in contentment. At the back of my head, memories of fairy tales warred with my rationality, hinting at journeys with no return and century-long stays. Eat plenty, because the night is young and filled with secrets, the man whispered. I turned to ask about the elfin woman, but felt rebuked even thinking about her. I have found more about the liquid your opponent consumed, Miss Delaney said as I did my best to eat with moderation, instead of gorging myself like one of Circe's guests. Mr. Need kindly obtained a sample from the town's, for lack of a better term, surgeon. The solution is magical in nature, and quite dangerous at that. It ignites the consumer's essence, pushing the body to its limits and providing relief from pain and discomfort, but it does nothing to protect the body itself. Whoever drinks it will be a dangerous, implacable warrior for the effect's duration at the cost of, I suspect, longevity. Additionally, the substance is a potent mood enhancer and disinhibitor which contributes to making it highly addictive. If the crew members do use it regularly, then they are fiercely loyal. I also suspect that higher brain functions might be impaired, from what I have gathered. I see, and how does it relate to your train line issue? Miss Delaney put down her tube and nodded at me. Well spotted, Mr. Bingle. An unknown interest is buying strategically placed land from local farmers at cutthroat prices, then reselling it to my venture at rates that make expansion unsustainable. Usually, such individuals or organizations transfer funds east to reputed banks to safeguard their interest, but it seems that we are dealing with a local, paranoid organization. Their refusal to deal with everyone is a weakness in the sense that they lack backing, but a strength because they leave no trail. We will have to inquire more. The sheriff mentioned that he had contacted his superior twice, but that it only resulted in threats to his family, I remarked. Yes, an excellent starting point for our investigation. I fear that I must rely on you for the day-to-day operations, so to speak. May I suggest? Miss Delaney stopped mid-sentence, and when I looked up, she was facing the city with a deeply intense expression. A moment later, I heard the roar of a gun. I was on my feet before the noise died down. Chapter 170. Just as I reached the end of the circle of light, Ariane's voice interrupted my mad dash. Alexander. Your guns. Her glacial voice cooled down my urgency. She was right, of course. I was running blind and unarmed into the maw of danger, and as my father always said, the line between courage and temerity lies in self-control. I quickly passed by my cot and grabbed my weapons, tying my belt as I moved. I ran the first yards blind as an owl anyway, relying on the path's regularity not to fall. My eyes progressively grew more accustomed to the darkness, and I found I could see reasonably well thanks to the radiance of the moon over my head, and the town's lights in the distance. It was enough to see shapes hurrying towards the safety of the buildings. I ran after them until I stumbled upon a scene that made my heart skip a beat. There were two bodies on the ground. The first, I dismissed with a huff of anger. He was a man wearing filthy rags, his face still contracted in a rictus of vicious ecstasy even as the last of his blood soaked the ground in a slowly expanding dark pool. He had caught a coach gun shot to the chest at point-blank range. The weapon lay discarded on the ground next to its owner. I am still unsure what led me to recognize her. Perhaps it was the cut of dark hair, or a certain pride that still pushed her to hold on in her last moments that caught my attention as I kneeled by her side. Her single eye found me. The other one was lost under bruised flesh and blood. Sally? She coughed. Her body shook under shock and what must have been a tremendous amount of pain. The parts of her left untouched still shone with vibrant life. Details seared themselves in my memory. The muscle strands under the skin of her forearm, used to hard work. The clean fingertips. A bare calf revealed by accident. They contrasted with the pulp mess left by ham-like fists, the marks of a beast-like savagery. My mind could not comprehend how humans could have been so mindlessly brutal, but my heart pushed me to grasp those searching fingers so she would know that she was not alone. Wished, she coughed, her voice broken by agony. Wished you had looked at me like that before. Sally, help is on the way. Help. Yeah. The Pearl. Coming for everyone. The crew, you mean? Yeah. She coughed, and this time blood erupted from her pale lips in an omen of death. I panicked because it was too soon for her to go, too senseless. She still lived right now, intensely so. She was so courageous to have come here alone. It was her coach gun I recognized lying on the ground. The crew members must have seen her, they must have recognized her. She shot one before or after they ran her down, it mattered not. They had pummeled her into the ground then left without a care for their victim or even their fallen accomplice. Those men were beasts, no, worse than beasts. Wolves mourned their own. Ariane. Ariane. I am here, the blonde woman said at my back. I had not seen her arrive, of course. Can you help? I turned. She was wearing a darker dress with what appeared to be chest armor, and she wielded a rifle. She nodded once, but there was something in her gaze I did not like, pity. I could make her comfortable. No. We must have doctors. Someone. She is bleeding too much, including from the inside. Sally started to choke. Her breaths were growing more labored by the second. Others. She said again. She released her hold on my hand. You must go now, Ariane said in a low voice. She kneeled by the woman's side and brushed her hair back from her sweat-soaked forehead. Will you? I asked, aware of the price of her curse. No. She is not prey. Right. It was all the time I could spare. I sprinted away, hoping to outrun my guilt, my fear, and the welling grief in my heart. If I had not. But no, I had to concentrate on the task before me, not on the lives those insane fiends left broken in their paths. I do not believe, dear readers, that I ever ran so swiftly as I did then. Every step propelled me forward as if by wings, but they were brittle, made of wax and feathers, and my sun would come soon enough. And it did, when I arrived upon Grove's main street and saw a Bosquian vista open before me. From the grocery by my side to the dirt road, it was a normal small town in Kansas. After that came hell and its demons. A horde of roaring, whistling, hollering riders galloped along the streets in a senseless cavalcade. The noise was deafening. They were carrying torches, giving everything around them a fiery glow so that their flushed faces and filthy hats made them devils and demons come here for a single night. The anger and fear in my heart turned to despair at the sight of so many men. They were at least 100. And then to impotent guilt when I spotted Walker among them. The horrendous man was laughing where he was, and on his horse's greasy bridles I saw his heavy mitts, and on them I saw much blood. And I knew he had brought his petty vengeance, and I knew that, right now, I could kill him. And I would not, for it would kill me. It was not self-preservation that drove me, but cowardice. I didn't want to die, not senselessly. Not like this. I did not regret that choice later, but know this. I was not motivated by wisdom but by fear, and to this day, it was that fear that saved me. I do not regret it. I never got the chance to regret it. After I gathered my spirits, I slipped in the shadows before anyone could see me. Gunshots erupted from the street, first one, then a thundering ruckus that wouldn't stop. I made my way along the back of the street, through gardens and flower patches until I could see the center of the men's ire, the Pearl in all its decadent glory. Fortunately for me, the bordello's management had more sense than me. The establishment was barricaded, every window barred and the main door was locked tight. A swarm of riders was shooting at shutters and walls with more mirth than determination. I raced a bit farther and crossed the street to circle back. A few burly men threw themselves at the entrance as I did so, but it seemed to be holding for now. The back of the Pearl was larger than I thought, with a low wall, several sheds, and a lot of room to hang laundry. I climbed over the wood separation and found light at a second-floor window. I hailed them, and soon Annie's face peered through the opening. The light framed her breathtaking beauty even as worry marred her traits. I finally understood what Romeo would have felt under the balcony of the Capulets' princess, if he had existed. Nothing could diminish her charms. Mr. Bingle? Is that you? Yes, my night angel, it is I, Alexander. What about Sally? Anguish stole my breath, but I tore the words out of my unwilling throat. She had to know. The crew got to her first. I am so sorry. I could not see her so clearly from below, but I believe that her lips trembled and a tear traced a wet path down her perfect cheek. No. Never mind. Get in, quickly. I'll open the door. I was let through and faced an eclectic crew. Old men, a few brawny lads and the prostitutes themselves. Without the feathers and glass trinkets, they were just scared women. Many of them were as young as I was. Should we evacuate? I asked. What we? An older woman spat. You just came here. Enough chatting, Hortense, Annie said as she clambered down from upstairs. Unless you got a cavalry regiment under your skirt, we need all the help we can get. That you do, a glacial voice said from behind. I turned to see Ariane and Mr. Need by the entrance behind me. The Pearl's staff took a collective step back. Although Miss Delaney had the appearance of a girl my age, she possessed a poised demeanor that spoke of supreme confidence, an effect only reinforced by the urgency of the situation and the impressive rifle she carried over her shoulder. As for Mr. Need, he was also armed with silvery guns that shone in the light of the only lantern present as if haunted by some inner fire. "There are men waiting in the woods behind us for you to leave. The crew was trying to flush you out. We have a secret passage out of town," Annie explained, and Hortense made to protest, but she was silenced with a glare. It surprised me, considering that Hortense appeared to be the madam of this establishment, with richer garments and an attempt at dignity. I was under the impression that they were in charge, yet Annie had the upper hand now. "It will carry us to those rocks over yonder. Far enough that you might avoid detection," Ariane conceded. "You should do so now." "What about the kids?" a prostitute with blonde hair and a pointy nose asked. "We have children with us. It will take some time to evacuate them as well," a dark-skinned woman added somberly. "Then you need some more time. The riders have gone through the grocery and found oil. They might decide to smoke you out instead," Ariane added. "I can go upstairs and lay covering fire," I suggested. "That could slow them down. It would not do much and I might get shot, but the fear from earlier remained strong in my mind and I needed an opportunity to exercise it. The third-floor dungeon room has thicker walls. It overlooks the street, so it should do," Annie says. "I will go," I stated. A few others volunteered to join, including 3 of the rough men. The blonde woman with a pointy nose joined despite my brief protests. I noticed that none of the others objected to her decision. We had the beginning of a plan. "Mr. Need and myself will provide covering fire from the bank's roof," Ariane informed me, "although I cannot reveal my presence so early. Do you understand?" "I do. I hope the sounds of fighting will attract the men lying in ambush." "That is likely. Unfortunately, you might be swarmed while you attempt to escape." "If only we had a stick of dynamite," I exclaimed, "then I could drop it on the ground and clear the entrance while providing a distraction to flee. 2 birds with 1 stone." Alas! Miss Delaney flinched, an expression I had never seen her express before. Mr. Need leaned towards her. His amber eyes shone with amusement. "Are you perhaps contagious, Puppet?" Silence. "Ahem. As for you, Alexander, I do have a powder charge with a timed detonator you might use." She retrieved a small packet from a pouch at her back. A string emerged from its well-wrapped shape. "Simply pull on this and throw it. Then run like hell," Mr. Need added with a dazzling smile. "Jolly good," I exclaimed, spirits rekindled. Sometimes, dear readers, it felt like I had a guardian devil watching over me with jealous zeal, favoring intelligent violence rather than virtue. "It is decided then," Annie said. "Everyone do their best and see you on the other side of the passage." "And you?" she finished with some hesitation. "We will find you, don't worry," Miss Delaney finished. Everyone nodded, allies of circumstances brought together by adversity and a purpose, to survive the night. I made sure I had my weapons with me and climbed the small stairs at the double behind the form of another fighter. Finally, the time had come to dispense some well-deserved justice. Asterisk. Back outside, 2 shapes moved through the night with preternatural grace. Their speed and quiet would hide them from the vigilance of all but the most determined sentries, and there were none tonight. The pair climbed the walls of the bank, now gutted and emptied of its contents. They settled to wait for the hostilities to begin farther across the street. "Sinead, I want some explanations," the female form hissed in a tongue that few people knew on this plane. "What about, Puppet?" "None of this. This Annie woman is related to you. I can taste it in her aura." "Of course. She is my granddaughter." The blonde vampire turned a murderous eye to her partner in crime, who merely shrugged. "Elaborate," she demanded. "When 2 people enjoy each other very much, the man pushes his hot seat and I will flip you over the edge like a witty pancake. Do you remember when we met in Marquette for the first time?" The vampire frowned. She remembered a fancy hotel. An open window across the street. The shadow of a naked leg. "You had spent the night with Louisa Watson." "Ansakamhiadisanaad, you didn't. I told you I had left her a souvenir, and that Louisa Watson would be promptly married. She was. Her firstborn son grew up to be an immensely charming lad who attracted the attention of Lynn Merritt 48 while they were both bored, horny teenagers. Nature followed its course and here we are. Lynn never told me of her first child. I believe that Annie was left at an orphanage so Lynn could marry her East Coast sweetheart. A tale as old as time itself. But that means no. Oh yes. You will never, ever get rid of me. Welcome to Generational Messes, dearest puppet. It is the true delight of the long-lived folks. Do you know that I once bedded someone who was my great-great-grandmother by alliance? It was the talk of the court for an entire day. I regret everything. I am sure you will be pleased with the final product. Asterisk. When Annie mentioned the dungeon room, dear readers, I admit that I expected some sort of cell where the most intoxicated patrons were sent to cool down. I was apparently quite wrong. Suffice to say, the depths of deprivation to which mankind would delve in search of earthly pleasure appalled me to an extent that I cannot put quite into words, and I still pray for the soul of the carpenter who designed and built that specific chair. May the Lord have mercy on his deviant soul. Ignoring the dreadful contents of the room, as well as the crude remarks of the men around, I took my position at the front, near a barred metal window. The blonde prostitute settled opposite me. Once more, I refrained from commenting on her presence. Ready? Everyone assented, just in time for me to spot two men working down the street, carrying a satchel between them. Fire at will. I lined up the man on the left and shot him in the chest. The second man fell at the exact same moment. You're not just talk, then, the blonde woman approved in a calm voice. I seethed at being judged passable by an armed strumpet. My short outburst of outrage died down soon, however, when I realized that I had a competent ally. I lined up a horseman come to investigate why his companions were dying on the ground, and hit him in the chest as well, but this one merely jumped in surprise and pointed at the pearl. Turkeys. Upstairs. Little turkeys. He rasped, yet somehow his voice carried over the noise of men crashing against the barred entrance. Shoot the turkeys. I fired faster. A second bullet in my target's torso barely got more of a reaction. He rode away, firing a hastily drawn revolver at the bordello's facade. At first, I thought I may have missed it until the torches of a nearby group showed the dripping red on his horse's flank and I finally realized that he was drugged to the point of numbness. All of them were. Damn serum. The blonde woman pestered. Those fucking swine juicers. Is the person who taught you how to shoot the same who taught you how to swear? I asked as I reloaded. Yeah, my dad. Should have done a better job at the swearing part, I told her with some vindication. Obviously I objected to the fair sex spewing curses, dear readers, but I had to repay her for her earlier comment. Fuck you. Soon, there was no more time for banter as the numbers of riders increased and what they didn't achieve through accuracy, they would soon get through numbers. Bullets whistled past us like furious wasps. The dull thud of lead impacting the dungeon's wooden walls reminded me that our haven was simply the least flimsy walls we had, and that there was a limit to its endurance. Worse, we were forced to shoot faster lest a lucky bullet caught one of us. Our only saving graces were the festive mood outside and our precision. Several times, the woman and I managed to shoot dismounted crewmen while they busied themselves picking up oil. Our bullets would catch them in the head, or in a part of the torso that disabled them immediately. Our task was only possible because of the perfect vantage we had, and also because of the one watching over us. That cold bitch of yours is a beast. My companion of misfortune exclaimed while yet another rider's head snapped back. It appeared that Ariane had decided to forego the heart in favor of an organ the ruffians did not seem keen on using. The results spoke for themselves. Many of the men stopping to take proper aim ended up dead. My world narrowed until there was only the window, and the targets beyond it. The crewmen knew where we were by then, and so their focus improved. At one point, a bullet pinged on a metal bar and traced a small, bloody furrow on my right forearm. The wound seeped blood but I could not stop because more and more riders were coming and we needed to buy some more time. Look, find, aim, shoot, reload if needed. Only my focus remained, and my will to survive. I was beyond emotions, even fear. I just had to line up the sight on one more moving chest, and pull the trigger. One of our men was hit in the hand, losing a finger but not his determination. His cries and angry mutters dragged me back from the strange mindset I had adopted to see that the blonde woman was terrified. Below, I heard the sound of wood shattering. We were breached. The crewmen had abandoned the smoking out plan, and they would be swarming us very soon. "It's time to go," I screamed. Everyone else pulled back with speed, and I wondered if they had stayed because I had. They were looking at me now, as I retrieved the powder charge. "Hope this thing works," I mumbled as I pulled the rope and tossed the package through the chip window bars. "What now?" the wounded man asked. "Run like hell," I replied, remembering the precise directions. And we did. I spared a look down towards the open space that formed the core of the Pearl, and I met the gaze of a tall man with a long black beard as dark as a raven's coat. He was huge and matte, with bulging muscles, yet his was a controlled rage. He glanced up and smirked. I smirked as well. Then, the bomb exploded. When Mr. Need had advised me to run, I expected a blast powerful enough to tear down a wall. I should have remembered that Ray and Delaney was of the school of thought that, if one elects to shoot the same target a second time, it ought to be for entertainment purposes only. The detonation sent us to the ground as the entire building shook to its unstable foundation. My ears rang and my head swam with dizziness. Dust fell from the rafter above us in a veritable shower. The smell of smoke and burned wood permeated the air. Below, the dark-haired man screamed as half his face had caught on fire, or so it seemed to me. I did not wait. I dragged the closest person to their feet and rushed forward. We raced down the back stairs as if we had the devil himself chasing after us. I followed the directions of the blonde woman. Our steps carried us down to the back entrance landing. Just as we reached it, the door to the garden banged open. I drew faster than I ever had before and lodged a bullet in the charging man's head before he even saw me. He collapsed at my feet, but the next man tackled me and sent my revolver clattering on the ground. I barely got the time to place my feet against his chest. His expression of bestial delight was short-lived. I sent him face first against the closest pillar. Unfortunately, I looked up to see another lout aiming at me. But I was not alone. The others opened fire and the man fell, pierced by 1,000 wounds. No more attackers followed, and I was helped to my feet by a shaken cook. We should leave. Discretion being the better part of valor, I picked up my fallen weapon and we collectively crashed into the kitchen just as yells and the sound of thrashed furniture erupted from the open space. Sweat covered my body despite the evening chill and my heart beat like a drum. We found an open trapdoor, just as planned. It led into an underground passage dug through the earth. We hurried through this claustrophobic corridor in complete darkness. The sounds of the others' breathing saved me from fear but not from introspection. I had killed again. I had been shot at. All within one day of choosing a cause to stand for. Truly, this land was in dire need of peace and justice. Tomorrow. I believed that I had seen enough blood for the day. We quickly left the absolute darkness of the tunnel for the relative darkness of a clearing nestled between rocks and trees, giving us a view of the main street in the distance. A dense forest of oaks and ashes hid the scared band of women and children huddling together on the side. I moved to the side, finding Annie surveying the land. "We cannot stay," I tell her. "The crew will find the tunnel soon enough." "I know. We were just waiting for you to leave." She sighed deeply, and I wanted nothing more than to hold her in my arms. "I am not sure where we can go. If the crew catches us on open ground, I will assist," Ariane's cold voice said from the darkness. Once again, people jumped at the noise, then at the appearance of my guardian Damona's riding into the camp atop a mare as dark as the abyss. I swear, dear readers, that Kilpies had nothing on this creature. The tall horse stopped and snorted in a way that felt derisive. Mr. Need sat behind her without shame despite the incongruity of the situation. He dismounted, and the mount bumped her head against him, which didn't make her any less threatening. I can have them protected them while we attend to some more important business. Ariane, thank God the two of you came out in one piece, I exclaimed with some relief. I would never doubt her ability, but lucky bullets tend to hit the idiot and the wise with the same exacting strength. Yes. What a blessing. She frowned, and I asked her more questions while the small crowd erupted in confused mutters. Did everything go well? Are we being followed? The woods are clear. Then. Is something the matter? The elixir makes the locals tasteless. I know. I reply with much outrage, such brutes. A scandalous display. I cannot wait to get my hands on the one behind this. What a coincidence. But, in any case, we need to reach the convoy. I gave them orders to hide in a more secure spot. We should be protected for the night while the crew crashes down. Then let us. Why are we even waiting for you? This is all your fault. A voice said from behind, silencing our whispers. I turned to the expected and unpleasant face of Hortense, the madam. Behind us, flames licked the edge of the pearl, spelling the doom of her venture. If you hadn't come, none of this would have happened. This isn't my fault, I calmly replied. She gasped in outrage. Oh, really? So the crew came to avenge tepid whiskey then? It was my doing. I triggered those events. But they are not my fault, I reply with absolute conviction. Some of my certainty must have affected Hortense then, because she stared at me uncomprehendingly. I had to explain. It was important. Was it bad that I stopped my face from being caved in? Was it bad that I drew on those who were about to kill me? Did I commit a crime? Was it a horrible thing to do, not to lie down and let Worker break me in two? Was it so unforgivable? You say that but Sally's dead. Yes, she is, because of events I started. I probably shouldn't have revealed that I was a lawman, that backed them into a corner. But perhaps they would have come anyway after the thrashing I gave Walker. Or maybe I could have lost the fight and then they would have come a few days later anyway, for something unrelated. Maybe. We can spin our yarns until the day of judgment, but it wouldn't matter because it's not my fault. I stand square in front of the old woman and cannot help but feel a bit of disdain at her sight. She is frightened and weak, sheep willing to bend before the first thug and let them run amok among those she is supposed to protect, because that's what a leader should do. In retrospect, dear readers, I realize that my anger was aimed at myself, at my earlier cowardice, even if it proved salutary. Hortense was merely the mirror to my failings. That was why the sight of her irked me so much. Nevertheless, I vented all I had on my heart. She would pay for myself, and all the others. My father always used to say, don't blame yourself for the actions of monsters and idiots, or you will be crying all day. I am responsible but I am not guilty. I was not the one who punched Sally to death, I was not the one who rode through the city shooting at everyone, oh no. If we are to distribute blame, I was not the one in charge of the town's security who hid God knows where. I was not the one who let Sally leave by herself to search for help. Hortense flinched, then, but I was not done. You got the short end of the stick and you look for fault in everyone but the guilty, and that includes you. The crew has been terrorizing this part of Kansas for years and you did nothing, said nothing, or did you think the money they spent here was legally earned? Ha! The ruined farms, the cast-off families, you were more than happy to forget about them so long as you had your tranquility. It only started to matter when it affected you. Guilt implies wrongdoing. I have done no such thing. I took a deep breath and settled down. Miss Delaney was following me from the corner of her eye with great intensity, while Mr. Need looked like a man at the theater. In some ways, they were my guardian devils, but in other ways they felt like spectators of an opera, observing tragedy from the lodges and savoring the catharsis it brought them. No. I was overthinking. I needed to recenter on the problem at hand. Distractions could not be tolerated in this moment. But I am responsible. Consternated groans answered my claim. They were confused. I am Marshal Bingle, an officer of the law. It is my sworn duty to bring criminals to justice or to the grave, and by God, I will not shirk it, no matter the odds. A single determined man can make all the difference in the world, so long as he has brains and courage in equal measure. No, I did not cause the crew to appear or to do what they do, but yes, I will end them, here or later, alone or with help, I will end them. And I will find those behind this band of ruffians, and they will rue the day they thought themselves out of reach. Now, those of you who wish to leave to safety, you ought to do so soon. The fight back starts tomorrow. And by start, I meant that we must plan for success. It might take a while, since I didn't even know where to start. Whoa, that was hot, the blonde woman with a pointy nose said, fanning her cleavage in a decidedly provocative way. I looked at her first, but my eyes were soon drawn to Annie, who now stared at me from under hooded lids in a way that endangered my very soul. I want to see what you can do, pretty boy. I will help you however I can, the fallen angel declared. But the dangers. You will need to gather information, yes? I am very good at extracting information. I am coming as well, the blonde girl said, enough being pushed around. Little by little, men and women detached themselves from the group of refugees. Those who didn't have children, the zealous and the believers. The mad ones. Those who would take the first step so one day, others wouldn't have to. I was facing some of the rougher sorts the West had to offer, and yet, in this moment, it was I who was humbled, because they were not sworn to this war, but they would wage it anyway. How could I refuse such a crowd? Asterisk. The godling has gathered a ragtag band of prostitutes and caravan hands, Sinead. I know. Victory is assured. The fact that you are right bothers me on a fundamental level. No, it does not. You love it. You are just being jealous. Would you stop being so perceptive, please? You will get your ragtag band as well, puppet. Yours just takes a little time to prepare, but you know what they say. The longer the wait, the more intense the pleasure. I hate you. Chapter 171. You could solve this entire situation in a week, I remarked. The blonde woman reclined in her seat, hands together and fingers twined in a demure pose that would fool many a man. She studied me with eyes as blue as a summer sky but infinitely colder. I have worked for decades to be able to solve a situation in days. I suppose that it is up to me? If you abandon your project and return to New York to board the first ship, then I will take over. A pause. Will you? She continued. Never. I erupted. What sort of man boasts about a dream then gives up at the first difficulty? I will stop the crew or I will die trying. See that you do not. I am just unsure as to how. You can always ask me questions. Yes. Yes, of course. Have you ever been in a similar situation? Where I had to defeat an enemy I had no hope of stopping in a regular battle? Yes. Indeed. Several times. What did you do then? She turned away and her expression grew distant. I borrowed an army. But here you do not have the luxury of time, I believe. Not with so many people you need to protect. There were cases where I lured mindless foes into a trap to take them down. A trap. It could work. What did you use? A positively ungodly amount of explosives. I sputtered at the thought of such a classical beauty in a neat dress manipulating such dreadful forces, and yet could I blame her? Was it not gunpowder and gumption that brought civilization to the farthest reaches of the world? Yes, we could lure the crew into a place and blow it up. They seem unconcerned with their own lives. We need to find a good place in explosives, however. Perhaps someone knows something. Ariane removed a map from a drawer under her desk and unfolded it before my eyes. It showed the local territory. Pins pierced specific areas in a color code I did not understand. This is Steelboro, an abandoned mining town at the edge of the trail. It was to be a mining town, but due to high transportation costs the activity never picked up. The crew came to expropriate the inhabitants when they heard that a railroad would be built in the vicinity. It was the final straw. Now, the settlement is a ruin. We could even use some of the steel if some remains. Steelboro was named after its founder, Mr. Steele. With an E at the end. Oh. They mined zinc. Nevertheless, they could have dynamite. Indeed. While you were moving to safety, I took the opportunity to have a talk with the mayor while he was inspecting the city for damage. He had much to say about the family who sends the demands that the crew backs, but the most important thing is what one can read between the lines. The elixir those ruffians quaff comes from a mysterious Mr. Winters. Until his arrival, the family was but one more frontier clan, albeit a cruel one. You think that they are patsies and that we must identify this Winters? Absolutely, and we must do it without him learning of my presence, or he might go to ground, only to resurface later with a similar scheme. He would know of you? People with his knowledge of blood magic almost always do. Fantastic, you have found much, Ariane. Between my brawn and your brains, we will get to the bottom of it yet. My elation was ruined by the distant voice of Mr. Need. We're all doomed, he said with amusement. Ariane did not share his mirth. Asterisk. I built a business empire starting with guns and expanding to alcohol and entertainment, but do people call me Ariane the entrepreneur? No. I regret teasing you, Purpot. I did not realize it was such a sore spot. And I created the alliance that stopped the Scourge Hive, bringing more species and factions together than the Lancaster renegades gathered to take down their insane progenitor. But do they call me Ariane the negotiator? Oh no, not at all. Oh. I have engineering skills, I can play the piano, paint, and I am a master of enchanting and blood magic, the equal of archmages, but do they call me Ariane the polymath? Ariane the scholar? Nope. I call you Puppet. But call a naval artillery strike on one war lady, and I'm Powder Ariane. Or the Boom Girl. Why? Why, I ask. Scandalous. Take it that way, Ariane. The ranks of the midnight aristocracy count a great many schemers, scholars, and entrepreneurs. But only one Boom Girl. You have successfully given yourself a personal brand. Take it that way, my dear. Whoever thinks you are only resorting to explosives underestimates you, and that can only lead to their ruin. And even if they expect explosives, well, they never expect how much you are willing to use. The vampire frowned, then relaxed. You do have a sweet mouth. The Prince of Summer smiled suggestively. No. Asterisk. What do I look like? Annie asked with a tense voice. Dust cannot hide the sun, rags cannot mask Venus in marble. You are my ardent dream, my fallen angel, and no artifice can make you less. No, oh, you are so sweet. I suppose I should not ask you, the muse replied, placing her hand against my chest. I felt the warmth of her palm through my shirt while her flowery perfume lured me in like a promise of spring. I was well and truly lost, dear readers. You should make ready, if you insist on accompanying Honor. I nodded and moved out of her way. We had made camp in a secluded clearing nestled between two hills, very close to the town of Steelborough. Too close, I would have said, but we would occupy it or be found out long before crew members would find us. I quickly found Honor at the edge and looking up. Are you sure, Marshal? It has to be done. We will not be able to arrest them. Although I loathe to be judge, jury, and executioner, I fear that I may not have a choice here. We are simply too outnumbered. Right. Anyway, walk where I walk, imitate me and we should be fine. It's an engine that taught me. I'm always eager to acquire more skill, good Honor. Lead on. I exclaimed. Shhhhh. I wilted a little under the quiet reprimand. What we were going to do was underhanded and, dare I say, dishonorable. The lows to which I must stoop to protect the innocent terrified me, and yet the hammer of justice suffered no weak handling. I had to go all in. Annie's safety also depended on it, which was a powerful motivator in itself. Honor was as dark-skinned as they came. He wore a deep green coat over a white shirt and moved with the predatory grace of a panther. We walked up the slopes and I could not help but wonder where his strange knowledge came from. Say, Honor, were you perhaps part of the, what was it, colored regiment? Non, monsieur, I come from Haiti and I traveled here seeking my fortune. My ancestor was Dessalines himself. This all sounded suspiciously French. He overthrew the colonial government and killed tens of thousands of Napoleon's soldiers. Good man. I am honored to fight alongside the descendant of such a noble character. I thought you might, monsieur. Now hush. We must not give away the game. We progressed slowly and kept our eyes up. I had my guns, but they were a last resort, or so I hoped. It took us almost 10 minutes to crest the incline as we were quite careful not to be seen. Our caution turned out to be wholly unnecessary. Stielabrow was equally nestled between two ridges and barely deserved the name of town. Rather, it was a village huddled around a mining pit now abandoned, with a single street and a well down near the exit. Most of the buildings looked deserted, but there were a few outliers centered on a 2-story edifice that might have been a saloon. Even from high up, I could spot 3 sentries, 2 on the roof and 1 in the streets. They were looking down, however. Annie will be here in 10 minutes, we have to get to work or the diversion will be wasted, monsieur. The 2 sentries on the roof first. Absolument. We stayed low on our journey down, although when I got close enough to see the face of our foe, I knew that they would not see us. I watched sentries at work before, having visited my father while he was back from India. They all handled boredom in different manners. However, they all exuded that feeling that they would rather be doing something else, especially resting. I did not get this impression from those men. Now I know, dear readers, that I compared those ruffians to cattle before, but believe me when I say that I expected more energy, more vivacious attention from grazing cows than I saw in those men. They lounged impassively, without talking, without any sort of drive. Their faces were frozen in a mask of bovine disinterest. Never did they even glance in any direction except forward. It was as if someone had removed from them what made them humans. Until, that is, they spotted a familiar figure making her way up the slope. Then, animation filled the men. Their impassive traits turned to grins of predatory glee, dripping savage, cruel joy. They chuckled horribly while we scaled the opposite side. See what I see? Do you see? I see, I see. They were debased, defiled, devolved to their most degenerate tendencies. Honor and I struck at the same time. He slid his knife in his sentry's more tender part with an efficiency that reminded me of a butcher and worried me slightly. As for me, I simply struck my target's head with a stone and a considerable amount of force. The pair went down like logs and without a sound. Below us, the third man had spotted Annie making a convincing impression of a survivor seeking help. He took a few steps forward, and I felt anger well in my chest. He would get close to her, with his grubby hands, his filthy clothes. He had lost that right the moment he fell in with a band of murderers and drank that vile mixture. We could take him down as well. She will lure some of the others outside. It would be best to wait. Divide and conquer, monsieur. If you say so. I watched Annie be dragged by the lot with trepidation. She was mewling and gibbering in a way that sent the man smirking, but she turned at the door and our eyes met, and hers were calm, calmer than mine in any case, dear readers. For the drums of the Light Brigade would not beat any faster. Thankfully for my nerves, we did not have to wait long. The sentry himself was tossed bodily across the saloon gates, body tumbling on the ground. He jumped back to his feet with a bestial snarl. His courage did not last long. A man walked out, soon followed by 2 other cow bandits. He was the red-hair man I had seen at the brothel's first floor, and he towered over the rest like a keep above a hamlet. A crimson gash decorated his left cheek. It bled a pinkish fluid as I watched. The man had been burnt and the wound was left unattended. It wept humors too unsettling to consider. The pain must have been excruciating. The sentry's rebellious fit lasted only long enough for him to stand back up. He and 2 others left in sullen silence. The red-headed man returned inside without a backward glance, a terrible oversight. We can act now, I suggested, terrified at the thought of leaving Annie alone with these ruffians. Very well, monsieur. Please take the one on the left. We climbed down from the roof of what must have been a dormitory, taking great care not to be seen from the saloon's windows. We trotted silently after the party seeking what Annie described as a caravan in distress with terrified women, but would only turn out to be their doom. I picked a stone and gave the man on the left a terrible smack. David would not have brained Goliath any harder, for my spirits were inflamed by fear and outrage in equal measure. The man fell. Meanwhile, Honor jumped from one man to another, silencing them with the largest knife I had ever seen. Blood spilled on the grassy path, over gray rock. It looked paler than it should be. I averted my eyes, not used to such violence yet. My father had mentioned it. Paintings and stories have always failed to express the horror of death, quite likely on purpose. Blood and innards on a recently living man could strip away the fervor of battle like nothing else. Only my sense of duty and Annie's fate kept the horrifying realization at bay. I had seen what these men could do. I would not stop. Honor and I snuck back to the saloon just as the rest of our ragtag band came from the road, armed with whatever they had grabbed during the escape. We found the door unguarded and crawled in. Another pair of men stood in the middle of a dirty room cluttered with crates and barrels. They were trying to look into an inner door from whence Annie was screaming and calling for help. I did not wait for the Haitian and smacked the first person I found on the way, bursting in a moment later. Sounds of struggle came from behind, but I had no choice but to try and save she who had so graciously acted as bait. I saw her push herself back up from a table, lips bloody. I ducked at the same moment, trusting my instincts and providence and finding them warranted. A fist swung over me, missing my temples by a hair. A powerful hand grabbed my collar before I could react. The red-haired man had found me. He cocked his arm in a move as predictable as it was powerful. Unfortunately for me, I was unable to dodge. I blocked the incoming blow on my forearm and felt pain. Numbness spread. We struggled for a moment and it was not to my advantage. Nevertheless, my unexpected resistance irked the man immensely. "I will crush you like an insect," he roared. I watched more lymph seep from the raw meat of his cheek and knew that I had no choice. I punched it. It was a harrowing experience for me, but an even worse one for him. My foe dropped me with a terrible bellow, taking a few steps back and allowing me to breathe properly again. He bumped against a piece of furniture and his already bloodshot eyes took on a dire intensity. He rummaged in his shirt for the vial I knew to be here, but I found myself unable to capitalize on his gesture as I was still recovering from my ordeal. "You're a meat, boy. I will enjoy putting you in your place." He brought the vial to his lips and smirked, but his expression turned to dismay as a terrible clang echoed through the room. He touched the back of his head and saw blood, then slowly toppled forward. He slammed onto the dusty ground like an old oak. I beheld Annie with a frying pan standing like an arena over her fallen victim. She was disheveled and her clothes were in disarray, but she was whole and so very beautiful. "My Valkyrie, my fallen angel. Wake up, champion. Honor needs help." Oh yes. Ashamed of discounting my comrade in arms, I rushed back into the main room to find my companion doing the same. We practically ran into each other, a dangerous prospect considering that he was still wielding his blood-soaked blade. "Honor, you are unharmed." "Well, except for that gash on your forehead. And you as well, monsieur, besides that spectacular bruise on your cheek." "Praise the Lord." "Hooray." My apologies followed our mutual congratulations, for I had left the man high and dry dealing with his own foe. "I conquer, monsieur. If you had helped me we could have faced their leader together. However, perhaps Mademoiselle Annie would have been used as a hostage or worse, and so I cannot begrudge you this decision. We just have to perform better next time." "Indeed, my good Honor. Although," I add after a frown, "I hope we do not make a habit of stabbing miscreants in ghost towns?" "Certainly, monsieur, we can do it in the forest as well." "Ha ha. Good man. And now, let us see what those ruffians left us." I actually let Honor handle that part out of concern for Annie, who had not resurfaced yet. I returned to find her still holding that frying pan, glaring at the prone form of her attacker. "When do you think he will wake up?" she asked. I watched the expanding pool of blood under the man's head, knowing immediately that such an event would not occur before Judgment Day. "Not any time soon, milady. How are you feeling? You were very courageous, but I cannot imagine how terrifying this must have been." To my surprise and guilty delight, she threw herself against my chest. I put my arms protectively around her before I could think and stayed still, too afraid to move, too afraid to even breathe. She was soft and warm and so very alive. Her back arched slightly with every sob. Fine hair tickled my chin. They smelled like sunshine and like her as well. Slowly, she hugged me in return. My mind broke apart through the sheer, unexpected felicity. I did not want that moment to stop. For a while, we just stood there, but honor eventually brought us back to reality by knocking politely on the open door. "Excuse me, but we have news of an urgent sort." Annie and I left each other with embarrassment. She dried her cheeks while I inquired about this new development. "A man escaped. He was returning from a hunt, as far as we could tell, monsieur. One glance at us and he ran away like a rabbit." "Did he have a horse?" "Non, monsieur, they are all still here." "Then hopefully he will need time before he can notify his fellow henchmen." "No matter. We were planning to lure them in anyway. Call the others and we shall fortify this place. Now let us see what the crew left us." I opened the nearest crate to reveal rows of rifles of different makes, most of them from the previous American conflict. They were old but in good repair, and more importantly, clean. Other crates delivered clothes and revolvers aplenty, as well as enough cartridges to withstand a siege, which would be necessary. The real treasure came from a set of reinforced barrels, familiar brown sticks in bundles. "Are those?" "Yes," I replied. "The key to all our problems. Now then, gentlemen with me, we must barricade and reinforce the saloon. As for the ladies, please clean and load the guns." "Which ones?" the blonde prostitute asked. "Why, dear Felicia, all of them, of course." The strange huntress graced me with a smile that would have sent most respectable gentlemen running, and more is the pity, for her markswomanship would come in handy. In the following hours, we did our very best to turn the derelict into a fort worthy of a siege, and I had never seen before such a motivated team of hard-working folks. Men shoveled slag from a nearby pile into crates, bags, and barrels which were then lines around the shooting spot we had selected. Most of us would be on the upper floor to give us a vantage point, and all of the windows were either barred to anything short of a battering ram, or reinforced by planks and the aforementioned crates until it would take a cannonball to breach through. As for the first floor, it was left free for now, but we had furniture we could collapse to turn the access to the stairs into a merciless slog. We kept an escape route at the back to allow us to flee to the mines in case all was lost, but I hoped it would not come to that. The determined women volunteered to stay to reload the guns while we fought. Soon, night came. We all had a nice meal in the common room and separated after deciding on a guard rotation. I was granted one of the small rooms upstairs, but when I entered it, my heart lost a beat. Annie was there. "Annie." Shh. "I am tired of being scared, champion. Please, do not refuse me." Ah, dear readers, I could write a book of poetry on what happened, but a gentleman does not kiss and tell. A gentleman does not do what I did either. Judge me, dear reader, judge me and condemn me for the folly of youth, for the fear of death, and for love consummated in that most holy and unholy of unions. Judge me, but do not think that I left my guilt behind. Just know that my heart was hers, and that I would have braved all the circle of hells for a kiss of hers. I would have charged the devil himself with a rusty spoon. I was taken like Ulysses but the sirens, but unlike him, there was no rope to hold me back. I never trained myself to control my love, for I had been taught it was the most precious of emotions, and so when love found me, it found no resistance. I fell asleep in her arms. Asterisk. We are pregnant. Sinead, I really preferred it when you played the court animal. Such an exciting moment for us, Purpit. Will we attend the birth? Should I bring gifts? I heard that the mortals like foreign kings bringing precious offerings. I think you have already spread your offerings far and wide, Sinead. No need to contribute more, or you will have more offspring than Genghis Khan. Is that a challenge? No. It appears that this little escapade of yours is coming to an end. When we return, we will have to proceed with the plan. You know why? I know. Mask confirmed your claims. Did they now? Yes. Ambassador Madrigal offered generous terms for us to join his organization. And what was Constantine's answer? He offered him and Bertrand generous terms to join the Accords. Daring. I like it, but you know what that means, yes? I know. We are going back to Europe. More murders. More intrigue. And this time, you will know how it feels to hide from the most dangerous predators of the land. I cannot wait. The ruffians arrived on the second day, much sooner than I anticipated considering the distance involved. I assumed that they were searching for us, or that our mysterious enemy Mr. Winters expected some shenanigans. In any case, the crew arrayed themselves against us at the bottom of the slope on their horses like some barbaric horde from ancient times. To my surprise, they were followed by a few carriages that must have contained supplies and showed a level of preparedness I had not anticipated from such degenerates. More surprising was the presence of a single stubby barrel between two wheels, which a group of cleaner men deployed at the bottom of the slope. Honor, who was by my side, leaned and muttered in a worried voice. "Do you recognize that thing, monsieur?" "Oh yes, Ariane Delaney mentioned it several times. I believe this is called a Gatling gun." Tope continued,